Even when times were tough, Canadians dreamed of having a backyard of their own, a place where they could relax, find happiness, and let their children romp. Today, that dream is being shattered. Backyards have become expensive luxuries. The houses in front of them, even more so.
The population is growing, and there isn't much land left. The cost of a home in Vancouver has increased nearly 30% since January.
There are many, many people who are hurting in the present economic circumstances, particularly in the area of the housing crisis. And it's not a crisis that it's going to go away overnight.
There are lots of houses for sale in any big city. The problem is being able to afford one.
Toronto, for all of its wonderful, multifaceted existence, is pretty binary when it comes to housing. There are lots of neighborhoods like this, single, detached family homes, and lots like this, a jungle of condo and apartment towers. But there's not much in between. Like, where I used to live in Montreal, my whole neighborhood was made up of duplexes and triplexes, and I loved it. It was this kind of seamless integration of, density, walkability, rich with amenities, connected by public transit, lots of green space, and, not a high-rise in sight. That's what urban planners call the missing middle, a type of housing that we used to see all the time, kind of middle ground between single-family homes and big, tall apartment buildings. But it's something that's fallen out of favor over the decades. So today, on About That, where exactly did the missing middle go? And why do we need to find it and build it now more than ever? So I'm just outside the downtown office of Nama Blonder. She's an architect, urban planner, and she co-founded a firm called Smart Density. And they're real champions of this missing middle concept. And she's going to tell me all about it. Let's just dive right into the missing middle, because if you had to explain in as succinct a way as possible, what do we actually mean when we say those words, the missing middle?
So the missing middle is, yes, if you want to, the clear definition, buildings up to 4 stories in height. But it opens up really the middle of maybe income and the size of the unit and different demographics, right? It's not just the height of the building.
Right. And so here we can see a few different examples. I mean, yes, there are the plexes, right? So duplex, triplex, quadplexes, mid-rise buildings, townhouses too. Mm-hmm. I mean, laneway suite, like all those kind of things would fit into this category.
Yes, because even with the laneway suite, that should be really the bare minimum of the missing middle. We are talking about all of the sudden more than one unit, right? Because the laneway suite will be a secondary suite on the same property. So we now have 2 families living in the same property.
Which is better than just one.
In the crisis that we're at, absolutely.
Was there ever a time when city planners did gravitate towards this kind of housing?
There are, and there are beautiful examples in the city built beautiful 3 or 4 stories, multi-unit, but at some point in our planning system, it changed. For almost 4 decades, it was not even an option.
And just so I'm clear, when you say not even an option, what do you mean?
Illegal. It's not allowed.
It was illegal.
It was illegal, yeah.
So this part of the story is actually really interesting because the missing middle wasn't always missing. So I'm in Church Wellesley Village, or just the village, if you know the area. And in the early 1900s, there was an explosion of apartment buildings, sort of like this one right here. Toronto's population was booming. First World War soldiers were coming back home. Immigrants were arriving, and they were drawn to manufacturing jobs. And this building, actually, so it's called the Royal George Apartments. It was built in 1911. A year later, in 1912, Toronto passed a law essentially banning the construction of apartment buildings. It was based on the belief that these, sort of closely packed tenements were filthy and run down and sort of immoral and not fit for Toronto. And, of course, wealthy homeowners didn't want those kinds of neighbors living on their street. And incredibly, that thinking, certainly in a legal sense, stayed pretty deeply entrenched in Toronto for a long time and prevailed for most of the last century. Okay, let's get into a few examples here. This here, we can see how the property has been modified.
So in this case, one of the proposals was converting a garage that perhaps is not in use into a residential suite. So it could accommodate, your elderly parents, or if your kids they want to leave the house, but it's not an option, rent is too expensive, how can you create a secondary suite? It is the very bare minimum of the missing middle, because this would fit your family needs perhaps, but it won't meet the city's needs.
Right, there's a lot more than just my grandma that needs to find a place to live.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. What about this? I mean, this is a bigger unit.
In this case, a garden suite, very similar, is a laneway suite. So the difference between a laneway suite and a garden suite is just if you have a laneway or not.
Right.
But in 2019, the city approved the laneway suite pilot to allow a secondary suite.
What are we looking at here? I mean, this is a much bigger construction, but it's starting to approach what we're actually talking about.
Now we're getting into what we call the plexes. So the plexes could be a triplex, a fourplex, an eightplex.
And this starts to solve the problem. We're starting to get there.
I'm not sure how much it would, really move the needle for Toronto, but if we're talking about Mississauga, Cambridge, smaller municipalities that need to take an active part, right? Like the province has, they just announced specific targets for each of the municipalities. This is definitely how they could and should meet those targets.
And even this is sort of just a small idea of how grand we can get with this vision of the missing middle, because this is an actual project that you've worked on.
We must have that discussion, because there are some streets in our neighborhoods, and think of in Toronto, Christie, Dufferin, Lansdowne. Yeah. These streets are just as wide as Bloor, College, Dundas, yet because of their land use designation, all they could have are those houses. So if you walk along Dufferin, Christie, you just see houses. The missing middle, if we really wanted to make a change, we need to perhaps upset the neighbors a little bit, but we have to do something that it will move the needle. Because if not, we're just going to stay with those cute typologies that will be great.
Solutions.
Exactly, that will be great for your grandmother, but not really great for newcomers.
Because if I was to ask you, what is the single biggest hurdle to having more missing middle housing built in the city, you would tell me what?
When the city approved the garden suite pilot, I thought, wow, this is the harmless policy ever. Like, how much can we talk about it? They got so much opposition, appeals, NIMBYs all over the city.
Not in my backyard.
Not in my backyard. And I thought, wow, this is really hard to get things done.
And that's just for a garden suite.
And that is for the garden suite.
Never mind something like this.
Exactly.
Okay, so Nama, we're looking at two different land use maps, one for Vancouver, one for Toronto. What should I be noticing about these?
Well, you tell me, what is the most prominent color you see?
It's a lot of yellow.
Yes, exactly. And the yellow is the land use designation of neighborhoods.
What does that mean? What kind of houses do you see there? What kind of homes?
Detached, semi-detached, townhouse.
Oh.
Yeah.
And that's the vast, swaths of
Same.
Vancouver and Toronto. That's just what it looks like.
Exactly.
I want to make sure I understand this. So let's slide this off here, right off the table. We're going to make this really simple for me.
Okay.
Okay, so let me dump these blocks out. Okay. We have 100 blocks. Every block is 1%.
Okay.
Of the territory. This is Toronto. And so the green, there's actually a fair bit of this city where the land use is designated as sort of green, park space, open spaces.
Natural heritage.
Right. So that's one section. We have lots of other areas. These are the sort of the darker colors. And what do those mean?
This would be, in this context of your blocks, anything that is not residential or open space. So all the roads, the blocks, things that employment, industrial uses are in those purple blocks. Okay.
Then we're left with these.
We care about these.
People live here.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so we have, I guess, apartment buildings, sort of bigger buildings that we see all the time.
The old rental ones, exactly like this one, apartment buildings, rental, the ones that we refer to as rental, mixed use. So, and it's so funny because when we talk about the affordability crisis, this is exactly the reason, scarcity of land.
Now, how many of these yellow are just single detached?
Are we start counting? Okay, 4, 5, 6.
Is it a lot of these?
7. This is 8. Okay, this 31% single detached.
All of this just single detached homes?
Yes.
So how do we turn this into that?
So the discussion of the missing middle is actually not converting this to that. We're not talking about high density, like mid-rise or tall buildings where we will see in the red kind of, this is near transit, this is in commercial streets. We're just talking about taking this and turning it from a single family to more families. And the limit is, the city identified is 4 stories.
So it's almost like instead of having all of these single blocks, you would start doing a little something.
This is our way to make our city more beautiful and more welcoming. And there's a vision that we need to start stepping towards, and we need to make those decisions, and we need everyone on board.
In here are some very common concerns, complaints about missing middle housing. And I'd like for you to draw from the pile. You have no idea what's in here, but I think you're well equipped to handle it.
Okay.
Hey, welcome back to About That. We are talking about missing middle housing in this country. And so, you know, when I use that term, I mean, you know, any kind of housing where you can fit more people in than you could fit in a single family home, for example, but something that isn't a gargantuan condo tower. Because when you look at, you know, a city like Toronto, where almost a third of its space is used pretty inefficiently, right? Like zoned single family homes, big chunks of the city, and lots of cities across the country. Maybe there's a better way. So what we're about to do here, we're going to bring Travis Hanks into the conversation. Travis, you're a principal architect with Hexity. This is an architectural firm in Vancouver. And we're going to talk about a project that you've been working to get off the ground for a little while that, correct me if I'm wrong, it manages to fit 13 units into a single residential lot. Is that right?
That's right, 13 total units. It is an oversized lot. It's not a standard lot.
And we've got a video that you folks have provided for us. So this is part of Vancouver, and this is what it could look like.
The major move that we've made, that we've been advocating for, is a courtyard typology. So there's actually 2 primary buildings on the site. One that's pushed a little closer to the street than you might see, you know, in previous developments here, and one that's on the laneway in the back. And what that allows is to have a, you know, pretty substantial green space in the middle. You get lots more light into all of those units, and you have a great social space right at the heart of the project that brings all the neighbors together.
Hi, my name is Shirley Shen, and I'm an architect at Hexity Studio Architecture. I want to tell you about how long this project is going to take from beginning to end. This project actually started in 2015 when a different architect was exploring a low-rise apartment for the site. This project was shelved in 2016 because the site simply could not support the parking that was required. In 2019, parking regulations were reduced for rental housing, and so that's when conversations were restarted. It took a year to confirm with the city that underground parking was not required for a rental project on the site. We were brought on board in 2021 to develop a missing middle type project with only surface parking. We were able to get through the pre-application process in only a year, and we were able to submit our rezoning application in 2022. The rezoning approvals will take about a year, and after that we still have to get our development permit and our building permit. And if all goes well, we'll start construction in 2026, and people might be able to move in 2027 or 2028. So as you can see, the project timeline is measured in years, not months, and our involvement will have totaled 7 years. For the developer, they would have spent about 12 years working on the project. This is a timeline that is appropriate for a high-density, high-rise project, definitely not for a small-scale missing middle type project. And that is why you don't see very much missing middle projects being built in Vancouver today.
Now, there is one interesting thing about how some in Vancouver want to tackle housing density and create more of it. So there's this thing called the floor space ratio, or the FSR. And you can think of it as how much total square footage you're allowed compared to the size of the lot. So, let's say you've got a 4,000 square foot lot, which is, pretty typical. An FSR of 0.7 would mean your total square footage, like your total living space, could be 70% of the lot, or 2,800 square feet. For single detached homes, that actually is the max limit by law. For multiplexes, the FSR is 1.0, which means on that same lot, you could build like this, or like this, or like this. You get the idea. But some say that's still too small. Like, if you want to get serious, really serious about density, you need to set the FSR at like 1.5 or even 2.0, which might look like this, or this, or this. The result, more units on the same lot, which in theory makes them more affordable. Okay, so Nama, we wanted to address some of the concerns that some people might have about this idea of building this kind of, missing middle housing in their neighborhood. Can you just wait here, just 1 second? I have something, okay? This, think of this as like the about that complaint box. Okay. Okay. In here are some very common concerns, complaints about missing middle housing. And I'd like for you to draw from the pile. Mm-hmm. You haven't seen these before, clearly. No. you have no idea what's in here, but I think you're well equipped to handle it. Okay. Go ahead and start right from the beginning. Mm-hmm.
Higher density developments will reduce property values in my area. I love that. Okay, we started with the classic one. So developments, whatever they are, small or large, they actually tend to improve the environment that they're coming in. We have, as part of our planning process, when you get, you're a developer and you're getting a building approved, we have in the mechanism, built into the process, things that you need to contribute. It's called community benefits, it's called parkland dedication, to ensure that development actually improves our city.
So you want to take another complaint?
Okay. Developers care only about the money and not for the true needs of my community. I would say you would be surprised by how many of them are willing to come to the table and listen and implement ideas that are coming from the community into their project. And it's okay that they care about the bottom line, because if the bottom line will be negative, it won't be built. As simple as that. And if we want more housing being built, I would love to see more and more communities discussing and having a fruitful dialogue with developers about the things that matter, like public improvement and what their community can get done.
Try this one.
The shadows of the building will block my sunlight. I would say that I have a problem that, we prioritize backyards over someone's place to call home. Because this is our planning system. We're saying, okay, let's protect your backyard from shadows. And in the process, we'll just cut 30 units of the new development. So not in the context of the missing middle, because, come on, guys, this is a 4-story, it's the height of the house. But definitely, we need to address the elephant in the room.
Right. You're saying that even if this argument applied to the missing middle, which it doesn't, because the buildings just aren't tall enough to cast those kinds of shadows.
High as a house.
You're saying even if it's just, are we really prioritizing shadows? 2 more here.
Okay. I'm worried about the impact to existing services, infrastructure, and environment. Okay, I love this one because now it's like, it's not them, it's the pipes. It's the sewage pipes that can handle new people.
Right.
And the answer for that, and I hear that a lot, almost every open house, I hear that one. We need to remember that this discussion is a purely professional discussion with the engineering department. And there are many steps in the process that these arguments are being reviewed and being discussed and being changed, and development pays for upgrades. So, and I never heard of any project that the engineering department recommended against it, but council approved it anyway. It doesn't happen.
But the concern is real, right? I mean, if people are worried about parking spaces, if people are worried about, the park capacity near them in their local neighborhood, schools, whatever, right?
One of the advantages of density, building inwards and upwards, means that we have more space left as open space, right? And the opposite of it is building more and sprawling out and consuming more land. And so if anyone is concerned about open space, they should be actually pro-density, not against it.
Nama, this has been fascinating. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, welcome back to About That. So here's the thing about the missing middle. Depending on where you sit, the idea of cramming 13 units into a single residential lot, may sound like a wonderfully progressive idea or the worst kind of neighborhood nightmare. But what is certainly true is that even its most passionate proponents don't see the missing middle as a cure-all solution to this country's housing crisis, because making home ownership more affordable again, it's just going to take a hell of a lot more than what the missing middle can provide. But, think of it this way, like the thin edge of a wedge. A way to introduce density into communities where that word, density, is like kryptonite. It's like a way to ease the transition from single-family home neighborhoods to something with a little more density built in, all the way up to dense, city cores with big, tall buildings. In a way, having an in-between depolarizes the conversation, and that, advocates say, is worth fighting for. I'm Andrew Chang. Thanks for watching. Take care.